Hello again, and welcome back to the second generation of Pokémon. We'll be starting off today's video with Silver because I don't think Silver got enough screen time in the previous video. So, starting off today, Silver is going to be capturing a Bellsprout. Might seem like a random Pokemon to capture, especially considering that I already captured one in Generation 1, so in theory I shouldn't be showing myself capturing it again in this generation. However, there are a number of uses for Bellsprout in Generation 2. Capturing it at level 3 was probably not a good idea. You can actually get it at level 6 if you go to the next area of the game. Regardless, if you did not select Chikorita at the start of the game, like a smart person, then Bellsprout is a semi-decent grass type this early in the game. And if you did select Chikorita, or if you just want to get another Bellsprout, you can trade one for an Onix in this house right here. Now, in-game trades, I honestly think these are kind of a lost feature in some of the later generations, because I looked up all of the in-game trades, and there are plenty in Generations 1 and 2, and then from here on out, Generation 3 has like 3 NPCs you can trade with, there's maybe 4 in Generations 4 and 5, and they kind of do bring it back a little bit in Generation 8, but, you know, I don't think there's enough in-game trades to be perfectly honest. There should be more of these. Especially since, in this case, Onix is a really great Pokemon to have this early in the game. It's not long before you're able to capture one yourself, but remember that traded Pokemon get an XP boost, and that's really helpful for Onix because it learns a fairly good move at level 14, which would take a while to get to if you did not have that XP boost. So, I made this trade in all 3 playthroughs because there is another thing that Onix gets. It's gonna come way later, I'll talk about it when we get there, but suffice to say, it'll be worth talking about. So, moving over to Gold, if you head north out of town, you will find the road blocked by a weird tree. Nothing we can do about that for the time being, so let's head into the Ruins of Alph. These are a mysterious set of ruins that I don't think we ever got any real answers as to what the purpose of them is, but they're a pretty interesting place if you ask me. The way they work is that as you get later and later in the game and start acquiring more and more HMs, you will eventually be able to discover alternate entrances to the ruins, which means you can find more and more of these puzzle rooms. For now, we only have this one puzzle room to work with. It is a basic slider puzzle. If you have any experience with jigsaw puzzles, I think you could solve this pretty easily. As you can see, the borders of the picture are visible on some of the tiles, and that pretty much gives away where you're supposed to position them. This picture eventually forms a Kabuto, and I don't mind telling you that 2 of the other pictures are also fossil Pokemon. It's really weird that fossil Pokemon would come up all of a sudden, considering that the Ruins of Alph are actually home to one of the most frustrating Pokemon of all time, but I suppose I can save that for later. And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, one of the things that really struck me about Generation 2 is how it has a lot of areas that make it feel kind of like a Metroidvania. One of the key features of a Metroidvania is very often you will come across an obstacle that you cannot pass until you have an item from later in the game, and then if you remember that was there and then come back to pass the obstacle, you'll usually find a reward of some kind hiding behind it. And that is something that they actually do quite a lot in Generation 2. I've noticed a lot of areas in Generation 2 where you will find water but you can't surf yet, and you don't necessarily need to go back to that cave with the water in it, but if you do and you surf through the water, you can usually find an item of some kind, or maybe an encounter with a Pokemon you didn't know was there before. There are tons of areas like that in Generation 2, and it really feels like they wanted to reward exploration more so than most other Pokemon games. I'm sure Generations 3, 4, and 5 have stuff like that, but Generation 2 just has so much of it. Anyways, here's that Pokemon I was talking about. The Unknown are one of the most frustrating Pokemon of all time. They're interesting because they are a sort of living language. There are actually 26 different Unknown, one for each letter of the English alphabet. But the thing is, they're such a wasted Pokemon because they can only ever learn one move, Hidden Power, which every other Pokemon in the game can learn through a TM anyways. So, neat idea for a creature, but it's such a waste of a Pokemon slot, I don't get it. Solving the slider puzzle actually unlocks more forms of Unknown for you to capture, and they actually do have a sort of side objective where you capture all 26 Unknown forms. I really don't get it. Anyways, there's actually another puzzle in Crystal version. If you check the back wall, you will find Unknown spelling the word escape. That's a hint that you're supposed to use an escape rope. When you do, the wall opens up and you can find some extra items behind it, and you can fall through a hole to find even more unknown spelling out words. I don't know if there's any deeper meaning to the words or if they're building up to something, but there are 3 other puzzles like this, so we'll actually be returning to the ruins of Alphenor to solve those as well, even though I'm not sure if the rewards are actually worth it. And one of them actually can't be solved until way later in the game, and you can actually lose access to it permanently if you can believe it. So, you know, I'll make sure not to do that. These items that I'm getting, by the way, are 2 berries and 2 medicinal plants. You can purchase medicinal plants later on in the game. They're way more powerful than potions and way less expensive. However, using them will tank your Pokemon's friendship values, which are a new thing added to Generation 2. Friendship does absolutely nothing except for affecting a couple of moves, and there are friendship evolutions, so if you're using the relevant Pokemon, you'll want to pay attention to that, but it's really not that important. Anyways, with the ruins behind us, we can finally get back to the main part of the game, which is wandering around and capturing things. Hey, what do you know? The first step into the grass, I got the encounter I wanted. It's Mareep. Mareep is an electric sheep, which has got to be the most cliche thing ever. I mean, Mega Man has an electric sheep, and I'm sure a bunch of other properties do as well. I guess Mareep is notable for being one of the earliest electric types you can get, but you kind of have to level it up to level 9 before it can actually use any electric attacks. It doesn't start with Thundershock, believe it or not. So it's not super helpful. I mean, you know, it is only 3 levels if you want to grind it up, and I did try to, but there's not really any enemies it can actually fight and defeat rather easily, which is something you kind of need in order to have a good Pokemon for in-game usage. Like Wooper. Wooper is a lot better than Mareep in that regard because there are a bunch of rock enemies coming up, and Wooper starts with Water Gun. So I might use Wooper, I'm not sure. There's a bunch of Pokemon that I could use at this point. To be totally honest, not everything I do in these videos is pre-planned. I mean, I know what Pokemon that I'm going to capture in each area because I look all of that up so I don't forget anything, but I don't necessarily plan on which Pokemon that I'm going to use. One of the decisions I made in this very video, as a matter of fact, is a very spur-of-the-moment idea that turned out really great in the end, so I'm glad I came up with it. But it's not as if I have every trainer and wild encounter memorized to the point that I know which Pokemon to put into every battle so that they get all of the EXP that they can. And while one of my spur-of-the-moment strategies did work out very well, there was another moment in this video where I completely missed an opportunity to do something interesting, so I'm gonna apologize in advance for that. Anyways, moving on with the journey, we come across this guy who's trying to sell us a Slowpoke's tail for 1 million Pokédollars. Whatever the currency is, that's as much as a bike in Generation 1, dude, and you're gonna try and sell me a Slowpoke's tail? What, you think I'm that desperate to craft a TM in Generation 9? Actually, they dropped claws in Generation 9, not their tails, but whatever. Anyways, this is the guy you get the old rod from. It's probably very easy to miss this, since who would talk to a random fisherman, right? And I swear I did not look up any of the hidden items in Generation 2. I found this one completely by instinct. I was right on the nose finding that great ball. Anyways, there's a reason they decided to be generous and put a Pokemon Center there. We have a sort of mini dungeon here. It is the Union Cave. Not much to say about it besides the fact that it is a cave, but there are some trainers here, including this spinner, whom I am going to wait patiently for him to turn away so I can get that item. Look at him guarding this thing. He's laser focused on protecting a single potion, which I just slipped in and stole from him anyways. Seriously, how did he not see me? Anyways, there's another spinner there. This game is riding spinners, I swear. But there are items to pick up. So it's nice. There's another Great Ball. They sure are handing us Great Balls before we can even purchase them. Don't know why they're doing that, but they are also handing us an X attack. There are a couple of X items here as well. And I'm pretty sure some of the items change in Crystal version. Like, I know that this trainer actually goes from not being a spinner to being a spinner, which is really weird. There are a lot of subtle changes like that. I really don't want to cover them all. Anyways, if you come into this basement area here, you can find the TM for Swift if you want it, and there is another X item, right? Yeah, it's an X Defend. Very strange. And you can also fish in the cave as well. Now, I definitely think fishing has vastly improved from Generation 1. The old rod and the good rod actually have their own encounter tables now, so depending on what area you're in, using the old rod can get you some interesting Pokemon, like this Goldeen here. Granted, you're still going to find Magikarp 80% of the time with the old rod, but all of the Pokemon that you can find come at level 10, which is actually a pretty good level for this early in the game to be finding a Pokemon like Goldeen. I'm actually going to capture it and even use it. What for? Well, you'll see. But you know, it might have something to do with the fact that Goldeen starts with Peck. I still don't really know what's up with that. I mean, I looked up a little bit of info about goldfish and they do eat bugs, so maybe that has something to do with it, but it's still really weird. Unless it's supposed to be doing something with those lips when it pecks. Let's move on, shall we? Anyways, we haven't checked in on Silver in quite some time. I think he was training his Onix. Maybe we ought to check in on Silver and see how his little training montage is coming along. And that training has paid off as Silver's Onix now hits level 14, which is when Onix learns an actual Rock-type move. Rock Throw, a move that was completely useless in Generation 1. It existed in Generation 1, however its accuracy was an abysmal 65% if you can believe it. But with Rock Throw's accuracy at 95%, we can be certain that it will hit on every single attack from here on out, and it will never ever... Well, sometimes it still misses. Its accuracy is 95 after all, so... Another problem, we don't have any badges that control the obedience of traded Pokemon yet, so... I guess Onix is going to be disobeying for a little while. I didn't realize that he would start disobeying as early as level 14, but here we are. Indeed, here we are on our way to the next town as soon as I grab this berry and hopefully pass this spinner. I just don't know how they work. They just sporadically spin around like that. That's gotta be weird if you're actually looking at it. So the first thing you see upon entering Azalea Town is a suspiciously familiar looking guy standing in front of a well. I wonder who that could be. Of course, the sprite probably gives it away if you played Generation 1, but first I need to heal at the Pokemon Center. And then after I am done with that, there is a particular house we need to visit in order to advance the plot. Or do we? I'm pretty sure you need to do all of these events in order to move on to the next town. I mean, I can't imagine them letting you move on to the next town without doing this. Anyways, there was an interesting item in that tree, an apricorn. I think that's how you pronounce it. We'll talk about what those are for later. In the meantime, we are introduced to a new character named Kurt, and he is going to tell us all about Team Rocket. Yes, they are back. This game actually takes place 3 years after the events of Red, Blue, and Yellow, but it looks like Team Rocket decided to come back, and their latest scam is to cut off Slowpoke tails and sell them. Good to know Team Rocket hasn't lost that talent for animal abuse. First Marowak skulls, and now Slowpoke tails. Well, with any luck, Team Rocket will still be useless in terms of battle ability, so this should be an easy dungeon to conquer. It is technically a dungeon, but it is a very small one. But then again, we've had 2 small dungeons in this video, so I think it balances out. Nice job, Kurt. You landed on your back, and now you can't do anything, and you have to rely on us. Isn't that just typical for Pokemon NPCs? So, the really great thing about Team Rocket is they have their own battle theme in this game. I really like it. And it's also maybe a teensy bit similar to the rival battle theme. I mean, I don't know if that's meant to be a connection of some kind. I do tend to make odd connections between pieces of music in this series, But no matter, this first grunt, as they are called, is absolutely useless. He just has 2 Rattata. So yes, the grunts are still getting just standard issue cannon fodder teams, which I find unfortunate. Anyways, he goes down, and you'll see when I get out of the battle screen that his position is slightly altered from what it was in Gold and Silver, compared to Crystal version. I really don't know what the purpose of that is. It's just such a minor detail. Anyways, I want to highlight this trainer in particular because this is the first ever female Rocket Grunt. They're still all called Grunts for some reason. But the female Rocket Grunt's design is really interesting because that character design originates from the trading card game, if you can believe it. She debuted in one of the Rocket sets, back when it was just red, blue, and yellow. And I think that's a really interesting fact. There are some elements of the trading card games that actually get inserted into the mainline games. Like the move Flail, for instance. That was a move that the Magikarp card had, and then it featured in the games as an actual move. So it'd be pretty nice if we got an imposter Professor Oak, but we never did, unfortunately. That would have been funny. I'm only pointing all of this out, by the way, because there's nothing to say about the trainers. It's just a bunch of Rattata and Zubat. Maybe this guy will have something different. He's got 3 Pokemon. Oh no, it's another Rattata. You couldn't come up with anything else? I mean, the Zubat do kind of mess with Chikorita a little bit because they resist Razor Leaf. And they do have Leech Life, which is a bug-type move. Still really weird, but that is super effective against Chikorita. I really don't know why this game has it out for Chikorita so much. I mean, that first gym has a type that's super effective against grass, and all of these Rocket Grunts with their Zubats. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Chikorita has finally hit level 16. I was giving him all the EXP for this purpose, because you know what happens when most starters hit level 16, aside from Cyndaquil, who evolved at level 14, but Chikorita evolves at the classic level of 16. We now have a Bayleaf. That's what it's called, Bayleaf. Going for a career as a courtroom officer, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, I forgot to mention that Bayleaf has a new move. It is called Reflect. Reflect was not that good in Generation 1. It doubled your defense, but it could cause your defense to overflow and drop to dangerously low levels. And also, it went away as soon as you switched out. But Generation 2 has completely revamped the move. Now it lasts for 5 turns, and it will stay even if you switch out. So I've actually used Reflect and then switched into Spearow here, which is reducing the amount of physical damage it takes from coughing. That's another improvement to this game, by the way, actual support moves that work on other party members. Also, Spearow has now learned Fury Attack, which is, not going to be that helpful. I mean, it hits 2 to 5 times, but it's a normal type move, which I guess Spearow does get a boost from because a lot of flying types are also normal types for some reason. But hey, we saved the Slowpoke. So they're going to introduce a new feature of Gen 2 here, but this one kind of fell flat. See, Kurt has the ability to make custom balls out of nuts you find on trees. And I probably could have worded that better, but as a sample he gives us a lure ball, which is a ball that works better on Pokemon that you fished out of water. There are other balls like that, such as the fastball, which is made out of the white apricorn we found earlier. See, the fastball is supposed to work better on Pokemon that have a chance of running away, but due to a bug in the game's coding, it only works on 3 particular Pokemon, and the other custom Pokeballs you can get from Kurt follow a similar pattern of being bugged or not working as intended. Some of them are still useful, but not all of them, and I'll explain them as we find them throughout the game. There's a little more to say about Kurt, but Silver has already gotten started on the Pokemon gym for this town, so I suppose I'll switch over to that for a little bit. So this gym starts out with a pair of trainers, however double battles have not been invented yet, so they're treated as a single trainer. If you beat one, of course the other one's not going to challenge you because it's technically a 2-for-1, and the point I'm trying to get to is that they both have Pokemon that originate from Gen 2, unlike the last gym which had no Pokemon originating from Gen 2, it was just Spearow, Pidgey, and Pidgeotto. However, this gym exhibits a similar problem because after we beat these two, there's not going to be any bugs from Gen 2, which is really disappointing because Gen 2 introduces some really good bug Pokemon. This is, of course, a bug gym, And for some reason, Spinarak is purple in this fight. I really don't know why Spinarak is purple. Maybe it was purple for some reason in Gold and Silver and they switched it back in Crystal. Or maybe it's just a Silver version thing. I'm really not sure. I probably need to look this up. But anyways, that's the last bit of experience Totodile needs to hit level 18. And guess what happens at level 18? Well, we'll find out after we get out of this battle screen. That's right, it's time for Totodile to evolve. So the evolution levels in this game are 14, 16, and 18, whereas in the original I think it was like 16 and then 20 or something? I can't remember, but these are very quick evolutions, I must say. There's not much else of interest about the gym itself. Most of the trainers just have some really weak bug-type Pokemon, including a Paris, Butterfree, and Beedrill. So let's move on to the gym leader, Bugsy, which also happens to be the name of a Kirby enemy. Well then. So Bugsy is a bit disappointing. You might expect him to have some really crazy bug types, but instead he's just got Metapod, Kakuna, and Scyther. None of which come from Generation 2. As I said, there are some great bug types introduced in Generation 2. Bugsy has none of them. And as you can imagine, Quilava versus the bug type leader, this is going to be a really easy fight. Just Ember on all of them. And he actually sends out Scyther second. Bugsy's entire strategy with Scyther is to use Fury Cutter, a move that will double in strength when used consecutively, up to 5 times I believe, so if he keeps using Fury Cutter over and over again, it's eventually going to get very, very powerful, but Quilava resists it, so he's safe. If you pick Chikorita, however, then dealing with Fury Cutter can actually be very difficult, so that's the first sign that you should probably be using a Pokemon other than the starter when you play this game, which is what happened to me when I was very young. For Silver, however, he's got Onix, and the interesting thing is, Rock is actually effective against bug types. I did not know this for a very long time, because that's actually a really rare matchup. Like, would you think to use a Rock type against bug types? But for Scyther, it actually means Rock Throw here is going to do quadruple the damage, because Scyther is double weak to Rock, being Bug and Flying. So that's one way to deal with Scyther. You just have to deal with the fact that your traded Onix is going to be disobeying you. Assuming you traded for one, of course. If you caught one yourself, you're safe from that, but it does take longer to level up Onix if you do it that way. Oh, and there's nothing interesting about Metapod or Kakuna, by the way. Kakuna might poison you, but that's really it. Now, as for Chris, I did not want to use Spearow again with Chris, so I decided to bring in Goldeen, who has a move that is effective against bug types. Yes, Goldeen having Peck was actually important, and Goldeen also has another move called Supersonic, which inflicts confusion. Since Fury Cutter drops back to its regular amount of power if anything else other than Fury Cutter is used, Confusion is actually a very good way to deal with it, because all it takes is for Scyther to get hurt in its own confusion one time, and then Fury Cutter is back to its base amount of power, and you don't really need to worry about it. You can just peck at it all day long. Yes, as I mentioned, goldfish actually do feed on insects. Some fish do feed on insects, so I guess in this case Scyther is nothing more than another bit of plankton to Goldeen, even though plankton are not technically insects. I looked all of this up. You know, this actually reminds me of all those scenes from the anime where a Goldeen pops out of a Pokeball and just flaps around uselessly because it's a fish out of water, but Goldeen is actually performing very, very well in this fight. I think Misty would be proud. She hates bug types. If it seems like so far these gym leaders haven't really put up much of a fight, don't worry, I have a feeling that that's about to change in the next town. Call it a gut instinct, if you will. Anyways, for defeating Bugsy, we have received the Hive Badge, which makes all Pokemon up to level 30 obey us without question. So Onix doesn't have to deal with trade disobedience anymore. And we also receive Fury Cutter as a TM. Fury Cutter in single player can be useful if you play it exactly right, but generally speaking, it's not a great move. And in multiplayer, you really just don't want to use it. It's not really that good. It is a bug type move, so there's plenty of ways to resist it and so forth. So with that out of the way, the only thing left to do is leave this town and head on to the next dungeon. I guess I'm doing it at night. But as you leave the town, someone stops you. It's your rival, pulling that old trick of showing up when you least expect him. Yeah, he probably should have been, like, inside the building or something, but he's gonna force us into a fight right here. Now, this is the battle where the game really wants you to start thinking about trading something other than your starter. The rival's first two Pokemon are not consequential at all. It's just Ghastly and Zubat. They go down very, very easily. The Ghastly might use Hypnosis, or it might paralyze you with Lick, but that's easily cured, and then you just move on to the next Pokemon like it's nothing. All three starters, however, are bulky, and they're going to have moves that are super effective against your starter. And, you know, if you've thought of Chikorita as a weakling up until this point, Bayleaf is going to hit your Totodile with Razor Leaf, or your Croconaw, whatever you've got at this point. So, I did not raise any Pokemon capable of taking down Croconaw by conventional means, unfortunately. So, I had to use the Smokescreen strategy. I just used Smokescreen a bunch, which is a move that lowers accuracy, and then I hoped that Croconaw would not hit me with Water Gun enough times to KO me by the time his accuracy was dropped so low that, you know, he basically can't hit me unless he gets really, really lucky. And, you know, this is a strategy you could use on basically anything if you wanted to, so it's not very exciting, it's actually rather boring, and to be honest, if I had thought to do this earlier, I could have used Bellsprout here, because Bellsprout, being a grass type, would resist Water Gun, and Vine Whip would be super effective against Croconaw, but I did not think to use Bellsprout because Vine Whip is still a really bad move. It's only got 10 power points. And I was thinking of using Mareep, but that would take a lot of leveling up because there's nothing for Mareep to fight and easily defeat. At least Bellsprout would have a bunch of Onix and Geodude in Union Cave, and Mareep has to get Thundershock at level 9. That would take so long to deal with, or at least it wouldn't be fun to deal with. In the end, however, I did feel bad about missing the opportunity to actually raise a Bellsprout, so what I did was, after this recording was done, I captured a Bellsprout and raised it to level 15, and I'm gonna try and use it in the future. If there's a good spot to use Bellsprout, I will use it, because I want to use as big a variety of Pokemon as possible, even if most of them so far have been Gen 1 Pokemon. You can see Chris is using a somewhat similar strategy. Goldeen is a water type, which means it will resist Quillava's fire attacks, which is probably more important than dealing super effective damage. Instead, Chris is relying on Supersonic to deal confusion damage, which is a valid strat. Confusion has a 50% chance of causing the enemy to inflict damage upon themselves, so it's still something you could use in this spot. You could also use that Mud Slap TM. That would be super effective against Quillava and lower accuracy, just like with Smokescreen. But I think the strategy that was the most fun to use was Silver's Ghastly versus Bayleaf. Ghastly has reached level 16, which means it has a new trick up its sleeve. The Curse! Ooh! The Curse is a very interesting move. When used by anything other than a ghost type, it will lower speed in exchange for raising physical stats. However, when a ghost uses it, the ghost will take out a chunk of its health and use it to curse the enemy. This Bayleaf is going down in 4 turns no matter what. I mean, you could get rid of the curse by switching out, but the enemy never does that in single-player Pokemon. And even if they could switch out, I think Ghastly also has a move that traps the enemy, stopping them from switching out, and we'll have to look that up. Sometimes I get Mean Look and Scary Face confused. One of them is a trapping move, the other lowers speed. Also, Ghastly is great here in general, simply because it's part poison type, so it will resist Razor Leaf, and it's super effective against other ghost types, so you can take out the enemy's Ghastly that way. Although, watch out, you might get hit by Lick yourself, and that'll be super effective against you. So with the second round with the rival out of the way, we see that he is interested in wiping out Team Rocket for some reason. You know, it would be interesting to find out more about him, but I don't think we really get anything concrete on Silver until the remakes, and even then that's only in a special event, but, you know, I can save all of that talk for later on. So with that done, there's really only one more thing I need to do, and that is to my item storage, because at certain points during the game, your mother actually calls you and tells you that she bought something with your money, and in this case it turns out to be a super potion. What she doesn't tell you is that she only spent 600 on the super potion instead of the 700 you would have to spend on it. So somehow she got a discount. I don't know if she's got some kind of special arrangement. There were no shops in New Bark Town, so who knows where she's getting this from, but all of her item purchases are made at discounted prices. Anyways, that'll do it for this episode. Next time we head to the third gym of the game, and those of you who have played this game will remember that it was a particularly difficult fight. So look forward to me destroying it, hopefully. I'm Ephraim225, I'll see you later everyone.